turning point. Today, the story of how a failed wallpaper idea became bubble wrap. But before it protected products around the world, it was supposed to decorate walls. Most people see bubble wrap as packaging, or worse, as something to pop when they are bored. A sheet of plastic covered in tiny bubbles wrapped around a product, thrown inside a box, and forgotten. But that is the strange thing about some of the most important products in business. When they work perfectly, nobody notices them. The customer opens the box, the product is safe, the company keeps its promise, and the thing that protected everything is immediately thrown away. But if that last layer fails, everything before it can collapse. A computer can be designed by engineers, assembled by workers, tested by specialists, sold by a company that spent years building trust, and shipped across the country. Every link in the chain can do its job perfectly. But if the final layer fails, if the box takes one bad hit, all of that work can arrive broken. And the customer will not see the engineers. They will not see the factory. They will not see the testing. They will only see one thing: a broken product inside a box. That is why bubble wrap was never just plastic. It became the final guardian of the entire business chain. And the strangest part is, it was never meant to protect anything. It was meant to go on walls. In 1957, Alfred Fielding and Mark Chavan were not trying to change shipping. They were not thinking about computers or fragile products or global logistics. They were trying to create a new kind of wallpaper. Not ordinary wallpaper, not flat paper with flowers or patterns, something more modern, something textured, something futuristic. The idea was simple. Take two thin layers of plastic, seal them together, and trap air between them. The result was strange, a flexible sheet covered in small air-filled bubbles. To them, this looked like a possible new surface for homes, a wall covering with texture, a wall covering with air inside it, maybe even a little insulation. On paper, it had logic. It looked different. It felt different. It was not just decoration. It had a function hidden inside it. But the market did not care. People did not want it on their walls. And that was the first failure. Not because the material was useless, but because they were trying to sell the wrong meaning. They were selling it as something people should look at. But the real value was not in how it looked. The real value was in what it could do. The problem was, they did not know that yet. So they kept searching. And this is where the story becomes business, not invention. Because creating a product is one thing. Understanding what business that product belongs to is something else. Fielding and Chavan had made something unusual, but unusual is not enough. A strange product without the right market is just inventory. It takes space, it costs money, it creates hope, then pressure. So they began looking for other uses. If the air inside the bubbles could not make wallpaper attractive, maybe it could make something warmer. The next idea was greenhouse insulation. That made sense. Air can trap heat. Plastic can cover surfaces. Greenhouses need protection from temperature changes. This was closer to the truth. At least now they were not selling beauty. They were selling function. But even that did not become the big breakthrough. The material still had not found its real job. Because those bubbles were not meant to decorate walls. They were not meant to save greenhouses. They were meant to take a hit. That was the turning point. Not the invention of the bubbles, the understanding of what the bubbles were for. At some point, the question changed. It was no longer, where can we stick this? Or, how can this look interesting? The real question became, what happens when something fragile hits a layer of trapped air, and suddenly, the same failed wallpaper became something completely different? A cushion, a shock absorber, a small wall of air between a product and damage. This is the moment bubble wrap found its business, because every business that ships something fragile has the same fear. The product leaves the company perfect, but arrives damaged. And when that happens, the loss is not only the broken item, it is the return, the complaint, the replacement, the refund, the angry customer, the extra shipping cost, the damaged trust, the feeling that the company failed. Packaging is not just packaging. Packaging is the last promise before the customer opens the box. And before bubble wrap, many companies used whatever they had. Crumpled newspaper, loose paper, messy fillers pushed into empty space. It was cheap, but it was not clean. Ink could rub off. The protection was inconsistent, and when the box moved, the product still had to survive every bump, every drop, every vibration, every careless hand between the warehouse and the customer. Bubble wrap gave businesses a better answer. It was light, it was flexible, it could wrap around shapes, it could fill empty space, it could sit in a warehouse, it could be cut, folded, packed, and used by almost anyone. Most importantly, it protected without adding much weight. That is the beautiful business logic hidden inside the bubbles. Air is cheap. Air is light. Air is everywhere. But when you trap it in the right structure, air becomes protection. A thin layer of plastic suddenly becomes a barrier between value and loss. And when IBM needed to ship its 1401 computer, bubble wrap finally had the kind of customer that could prove the idea. Because IBM was not shipping a toy, it was shipping a serious machine. A computer represented engineering, precision, money, reputation, and trust. If that machine arrived damaged, it was not just a shipping problem. It was a business problem. Bubble wrap helped solve that. And once one major company used it to protect something valuable, the meaning of the product changed forever. It was no longer failed wallpaper. It was protective packaging. And that difference is everything. Same bubbles, same trapped air, same strange material, but a completely different market. This is why the story matters. Because sometimes a product fails not because it is bad, but because people are selling the wrong function. Fielding and Chavan first tried to sell a surface. Then they tried to sell insulation. But the world did not need their product on a wall. The world needed it inside a box. Because business does not only happen when a product is made, business also happens when that product reaches the customer safely. A perfect product that breaks during delivery is not perfect anymore. A happy customer who opens a damaged item is not happy anymore. A brand that fails at the final step still failed. Bubble wrap reduced that risk. Fewer damaged goods, fewer returns, fewer complaints, fewer losses, more trust, and more confidence to ship fragile products farther. That is why this little sheet of trapped air became so powerful. It protected products. But more than that, it protected the customer experience. It protected the sale after the sale had already been made. It protected the company's promise, all the way to the moment the box was opened. And maybe that is why people underestimate it. Because the best protection disappears when it works. Nobody thanks the bubble wrap when the glass arrives safely. Nobody thinks about the air pockets when the computer turns on. Nobody remembers the packaging when the product is perfect. But somewhere between the factory and the customer, those tiny bubbles did their job. They absorbed the impact. They took the pressure. They stood between months of work and one expensive mistake. And that is the real turning point. Bubble wrap did not become global because people loved popping it. That came later. It became global because businesses needed a simple way to protect value in motion. A product that began as strange wallpaper became one of the quiet tools behind modern shipping. Not because it looked beautiful, not because people wanted it on their walls, but because it solved one of the oldest problems in business: how to make sure the customer receives what you promised. Safe, whole, unbroken. Sometimes the most important part of a product is the part the customer throws away. And sometimes the difference between a happy customer and a lost one is just a thin layer of trapped air.